I think unfortunately, like what we're seeing is just an acceleration of trends that already existed. And I think post 2020 with George Floyd, there was a big upswing in dollars and support to sort of more DEI focused programs. But already before this November, those numbers were below where they had been in 2020 anyways. So I think that it's an area that you shouldn't count on the prevailing winds of sentiment. You should believe in your thesis. I believe that these founders and these companies are a better bet, and I'm going to put my money where my mouth is. And we'll see on the other end if historical data is any precedent, then I believe we'll come out the other side. But I think we need more people to draw a line in the sand and say this is the right way to invest, not just for moral reasons, but also for purely financial reasons as well.
Welcome to the Innovation Blueprint, the podcast where we explore the latest in business, technology, and industry transformation. I'm Haresh Singhani, and in each episode, we dive into the strategies, challenges, and innovations reshaping our industries. Join thought leaders and experts as they discuss how innovation and technology, from AI to sustainability, drive growth and change. Good morning, Jesse. How are you?
Doing well. How about yourself?
I'm doing really well. Well, welcome to the Innovation Blueprint. It's awesome to have you.
I really appreciate you guys reaching out and having me.
Yeah, we've been working on, coordinating this for some time, but I'm glad we could make it happen now. So it's a snow week in Seattle, right? How's that treating you?
I'm from Arizona originally, so I love the snow. I still get giddy every time I see it, so I'm having a great time in the snow.
Awesome. I guess for the benefit of our audience, and also since you and I haven't had a chance to converse at length in the past, if you could start us off with what you're doing and kind of the path of life as to how you got there. Feel free to include whatever relevant details, personal, professional, as you wish. But I know you're involved in setting up an investment fund, it looks like.
So I began my professional career as a scientist, a bench scientist, mostly in micro and molecular biology. I started at the University of Arizona in an environmental micro lab doing, academic-based work, which was always fun, and I enjoyed the science of it, but felt very early on that the sort of paradigm of publish or perish of academia wasn't going to be a good fit for myself. So after I graduated, I jumped ship to industry and worked for a local biotech startup that had kind of spun out of Roche after they bought Ventana out, and did some more sort of diagnostic work. And that was my first sort of work in a highly regulated space. So I was on the team getting our 510(k) certification and getting the product ready to launch on market. And that was a really good experience to sort of get on the ground and see the nuts and bolts of what it takes to bring a biotech or life science product to market, and sort of the trials and tribulations along the way.
Was it like a blood test type of a product, or was it like in a clinical setting, a real-time clinical setting where it would touch the human patient or something like that?
Yeah, so it was a company called Accelerate Diagnostics, and what we did was positive blood culture analysis, so identifying microbes or fungi that may be present in people's blood, and then doing what's called antimicrobial sensitivity testing to see what drugs would be best to treat. Yeah, so that was a really fun experience. Got to learn a lot there. My wife is a doctor, and she was finishing up med school and got placed up here at the University of Washington for her residency. So came up here to the Pacific Northwest, actually started working on another blood-based biotech startup called Resolution Bioscience here in town. And we did blood-based diagnostics for oncology, primarily companion diagnostics for, different pharma drugs that relied on, genetic markers in cancer. So we did a lot of work there. That was a fun company to be at because I was employee 13 there. And then at the time that I left, we were well over 100, got bought out shortly after by Agilent. So that was definitely a different experience than my previous one. And during my time there, I went from doing sort of more R&D to translating to a clinical bench scientist. And that was kind of where I decided that maybe being a bench scientist wasn't what I wanted to spend the rest of my time doing. And, that also coincided with COVID, working from home a bit, deciding that I liked that and it worked well with my schedule and my skills. And so sort of serendipitously, I had applied to a job for a Swiss biotech and life science VC firm to do sort of scientific due diligence for them. And they reached out and asked if I was still interested. So started doing that. And that was my sort of first foot into the door of, the venture capital and investing world. I was at that firm for a little over 3 years and, went from doing scientific diligence to like helping with syndication and expanding our venture capital network and filling out rounds for our clients, scouting new investments and that sort of thing. But sort of the through line through all of those experiences for me was the fact that 9 times out of 10, I was the only person of color in any room that I was in, whether that's the lab or, the clinical lab, the research lab, or the boardroom, so to speak, on the venture capital side. And, I felt that like for me, it had been a largely isolating sort of experience. I felt sort of called to change that and started thinking about what the best way to do that might be. I could try and start my own company and then maybe I make a change off for 10 people, or I could, potentially be the person that is actually writing checks and my sort of outreach would be multiplied from there. And around the same time, I met my partner during the Seattle Angel Conference, another Black man. It was a revelation to see someone that looked like me on the other side of the Zoom screen, and we had started talking together. Originally started with Angel Syndicate, the Washington State Black Angel Network, that was focused on funding early stage Black founders in particular. And in building that out, we kind of came to the conclusion, well, if we can do this, then we can do a venture capital fund. So then here we are, we're raising our first fund at the moment to invest in diverse and historically underrepresented founders. So a little bit of a wider remit than the Angel Syndicate, but with a focus on sort of deep tech, highly technical companies and founders at early stages where we can really use our in-house technical expertise to help with de-risking and due diligence on those sort of early stage companies. So that was a long-winded way of saying, now I'm in VC.
I thought it was pretty brief. So compared to kind of the span of the journey, right? Going back into one of the transitions, which was, so you started as kind of a clinical expert or working on a clinical side, clinical diagnosis, and then on to research, which is one transition. And then from there, you've transitioned into kind of business investment, etc., right? So in both of those transitions, did you get a taste of the kind of the next phase? And then you're like, oh, I want to expand on that. Is that how it happened?
So I'd say the research into clinical, less so. It was just kind of like the necessary next step for where we were at as a company. Definitely going from clinical to venture capital, because I started initially just doing pure scientific diligence. It gave me the sort of space and time and exposure to learn more about the financial side of things. And so then, yeah, that definitely was a more gradual expansion out into learning more about the VC space and how that worked.
I see. I had a transition, I guess, decades ago now, where I was on the product and engineering side heavily. And then in small startups, even if you're running a technical function like engineering or product, everybody gets to go be in front of the clients. And so that gave me a taste for that. I liked it and I wanted to do more of it. And that's how eventually that became an entrepreneurial journey. And I'm always curious how people transition, because what happens is we all plan things and then we start doing one thing, and then you, over the course of doing that one thing, either you love it and you stay there, or you get exposed to 3 or 30 other things and one of the other things start looking more interesting, right? And then becomes the focus of your energy, even if before you formally might change roles or organizations and domains and so on. One of the things I hear when people make similar transitions, such as yourself, is that they see that when they're, quote, wearing lab scientist or doctor or whatever, that kind of deep technical expertise that they might be having, when they're on that journey, there's a certain pace of scaling yourself. But if you take on roles like either starting a company or especially if you become an investor, it's potentially a way to scale in a way that would be harder, right? If you're working on specific individual projects. Obviously, the rewards are very different and they both could be equally rewarding. It just depends on what people like. Another thing that I've seen is as the people kind of progress in their careers, scaling becomes more interesting, right? And so there's a gentleman I got to work with. He's now an executive at Walmart. He talks about product, process, and people. So when you're early in your career, right, you're gaining expertise on individual products or deliverables and so on, right? And then as you kind of progress, and it could be in a corporate hierarchy, you start looking at the process of how things are being done. So first you were learning how to do things, right, the products. And then you focus on the process in your potentially mid-career, 10 years plus into your career. And then eventually you start focusing on people because people are the ones who create the processes and so on, right? So that's kind of his description of how sometimes people scale over the years.
That rings pretty true. Although in my case, maybe the process part was a little bit accelerated at the two startups that I was at. Cause like you were saying, when you're at a smaller startup, you wear a lot of different hats. And I definitely found myself being drawn after a little bit of time at each of those companies to we've maybe not got the product absolutely lined out, but what are the processes that we can actually change to make what we're doing with the product more efficient or, more productive, what have you. So that rings very true.
And scale is the name of the game, right? Especially in venture domain, right? It's like, this is something I guess we got to learn in some ways the hard way, but there's profitability and scalability. These two are the most important things, right? When it comes to, for-profit companies, or probably in general in life. And in the first .com days or first Internet 1.0, people every time people think the paradigm has changed, they confuse the order of the two, right? And it's like, let me get scale and I'll fix profitability later. But that usually is not a good idea. But sometimes we get ahead of ourselves, like maybe in the AI boom, we might be there now. I don't know.
There might be a few Googles or Facebooks that come out of it, but the vast majority of them that chase scale over profit are no longer with us. So
Exactly. Obviously, our big story in Seattle that it was successful was Amazon, right? Who chased scale over profits for a long time. In some ways, they're still doing that. Another thing about scaling is that you start relying on other people to do things, right? It's like the rope got longer that you're pushing on. What is the state of the fund you're putting together exactly?
We're in progress of raising Fund 1. We're targeting about $3 million. We kicked off last year around summer, but the election provided a lot of uncertainty in the forecast. So yeah, I think we're more actively fundraising at the moment than we had been previously.
So I guess looking at your entire investment career, or how long has it been since you made the first investment as an angel or as a syndicate?
Yeah, so our first syndicate finished last June and we made 2 investments. We were doing kind of like an event fund style, similar to the Seattle Angel Conference, where we start with 20 or so and then we winnow down to the top 5 and then do a final live vote. But the winner and the runner-up were both compelling enough that we ended up doing the 2 investments there.
Okay.
So that was really gratifying that we had enough interest and enough high quality applicants that honestly we could have made an investment of anybody in the top 5. But with a syndicate, there's only so many dollars to go around. And then sort of previous to the syndicate, I was mostly in an advisory capacity at Nodes Advisors, which is the Swiss fund. Made a few picks there that we ended up doing direct investments in that were biotech companies.
So my question is, so it's a relatively brief journey, right? Because you're just kind of starting on this. So I guess how has it been in terms of like your confidence that you placed in the founders and the entrepreneur teams versus kind of how they've done so far compared to your expectations? What frameworks did you use to decide who would merit investment? And then how is the learnings of how those investments turn out? How are you taking those to improve the frameworks that you've been using?
Yeah, so part of our framework for the Angel Syndicate is that it's not just about investing in Black founders. It's also about finding new people to be angel investors and expanding the envelope of who considers themselves an investor. And so a lot of the work that we do through the syndicate is education on the angel fronts. We spend a lot of time and effort sort of going through the ins and outs of equity investing, private equity investing, as well as, sort of education around how to do due diligence, how to think about what your investment thesis might be, and how to develop that. And then through the process of the event fund, so the event fund is done totally on a vote basis. So the angels, kind of the wisdom of the crowd, vote on who they think is a good company. And we, talk about it, discuss, and then the final 5, we go through a full due diligence exercise. We typically appoint like a lead person that has experience to sort of delegate, but then we share all the diligence reports, and then the diligence plus the final pitch is how we get to, sort of making the decision. I think that we're largely going to carry that framework forward for the angel syndicate. On the venture capital fund, it'll be a little bit different because it's relying mostly on, Evan and my own technical expertise and the skills that we've built through our careers to sort of make the judge on the technical side. But, as early stage investing is almost always dependent on the team more so than the idea. A good team will pivot to find a great idea. So both on DreamWorld side and the angel syndicate side, it's also a lot of education around the sort of intangibles that come along with investing and how to, gauge how you feel about a person on a team and their thinking in particular.
What kind of plans or how have you helped the companies or the founders after you invested to increase their odds of success, right? So how do you stay involved?
Yeah, I think that's a huge piece of what we're trying to do is build a network of other funds, other angel investors, other service providers, or just like knowledge network, people that can help these companies and connecting them to the right resources. I think part of the disadvantage that diverse and underrepresented founders face is that they don't have access to those traditional networks of expertise or capital. And so we are, 1, trying to expand our own network, and 2, link that to our founders. Another initiative that we've done is we've started a nonprofit organization called Venture Black that is meant to sort of foster and support venture scale business in the Black community in the Seattle area. And so that's bringing together experts, researchers, founders, funders, service providers, and giving them sort of a lighthouse, if you will, to like where everybody can congregate. Because I think that one of the things that a lot of diverse people find is that the higher you go up the ladder in your like chosen field, the more isolated you are. And so we're trying to kind of build a rallying point and bridges between different people and experts and places, because there's people that look like us in every company and sector around. We just need to be able to find each other and to rely on each other. So connecting, I think the biggest thing is connecting our founders to the resources that are out there that they may not have access to from the outset.
I see. I guess with the change in leadership in Washington, there's a lot of change or a lot of maybe rethinking, right, being done around how all the people of all communities can be supported for all endeavors or all pursuits. And so there's this question of, balancing, and I'm not sure if this is the right framing even, but people frame it this way, which is balancing merit versus diversity or merit versus demographics, right? And so there are those who argue that, just chase merit and the rest will take care of itself. Right. And so as an investor, my guess is that, I would expect that any investor is trying to maximize profits. Right. And so whenever you put another kind of a lens on it saying, I'm going to invest in environmentally sound, environmentally responsible companies. I'm going to invest in Black founders. I'm going to invest in other, pick whatever attributes you want to attach. Right. In addition to maximizing profit, because you still want to probably maximize profit, I'm guessing. Right. Mm-hmm. So, and I'm expecting you would have thought about this as you started your funds and your syndicates and so on. So any thoughts on how you maximize the outputs or the optimize the investments, right, universally while supporting, Black founders?
Yeah, for sure. I think that the main thing that we sort of came to when we were building our thesis is that there is quite a bit of data and evidence that shows that, diverse, underrepresented founders have better returns. They tend to be more capital efficient. They tend to have better product market fit by like knowing their communities better,
Yeah.
and, all that sort of thing. And there's also the sort of intangibles that come along with being a founder of color or an underrepresented group in a space that does not look like you. There's the grit, the perseverance, the thick skin, that sort of thing. So our sort of underlying thesis is that by picking these founders, there's hidden alpha there. And the thing that we enable is being able to link them to all the support and services that already exist for other founders. And if our baseline is higher than, the normal founder, which we think it is based on the data, then if we can get them through that initial sort of valley of death, then the numbers are in our favor. Maybe we're not playing with the normal 80-20 power law. If we're even up like 2% on that side, then the math works out for us. So that's kind of how we are approaching that problem.
I find it's always hard to quantify a lot of things, right? Some of it is based on your intuition as well. What are the domains? So aside from who the founders are you focused on certain domains, or is that part is open?
We're technically vertical agnostic, but we have a bias towards areas where we have in-house expertise to be able to evaluate the company. My background is in life science and biotech. Evan is a computer scientist by training. He's got quite a long career in both hardware and software. And we are actually, really looking to expand our LP base, kind of like we're doing with Angel Syndicate, to more people that wouldn't normally think of being an LP in a fund, but have a lot of technical or operational experience that they can use. And so we're trying to construct our sort of LP base to add additional areas where we have expertise. That being said, I think that with our network, we can provide value to any founder of any company. And I think one of the best things about sort of being technical people is that we know what we don't know. And so we can be upfront with founders and be like, give them a check, but also point them to people that can answer the questions that we maybe can't as well.
Got it. Okay. I mean, it sounds like an exciting place to be. And I guess hunting for successful investments is always there's so many entities trying to do that, so that it's a very rich intellectually field as far as how do you tell bets to make and who to bet on. Going back towards kind of your personal journey, pick 2 or 3 times or once in your journey so far professionally, and it could be even personal journey, education, family, and what have you, health, where you were in a deep pickle and you had to get out, right? Or you had to crawl out or make your way out of there. So I'm curious if there are any anecdotes that come to mind and kind of some lessons or things that were points of growth or learning.
Yeah, actually, when I was in undergrad, I started in the biosystems engineering program, which at the University of Arizona, which is pretty competitive and difficult. One, I came from a small town where I was in all the gifted classes and didn't have to study and try hard. So college was already a bit of a reality check for me.
Was it also in Arizona?
Yes. I grew up in Kingman, Arizona, up north, about an hour south of Vegas. So college was already a bit of a struggle to begin with, but in my sophomore, junior year, I ended up having some pretty severe health issues. I contracted what's called valley fever, which is a fungal infection endemic to the Southwest.
Oh, wow.
And most people get it and they think it's the flu or a cold and then they get over it, but it affects Black people a lot more severely. And I, at the time, was taking way too many credits of college and working 2 jobs. So I think I was a bit immune compromised.
Sure.
And being a young man, I decided that I didn't need to go to the doctor and I'd get over it. That did not work out in my favor. And I ended up having a pretty severe systemic infection that required about 1.5 years of sustained, medication and eventually surgery to remove a part of my lung. But I was very stubborn and hard-headed and decided that I wasn't going to take a leave of absence from school to focus on my health. And as you might imagine, proceeded to fail or, not do as well as needed in a bunch of my classes. And I knew I wasn't going to be able to continue with the engineering program, so I moved over to biology. But that sort of process really taught me that, sometimes the right answer is to stop and to go around and reassess where you're at. I think that as a culture in America, we tend to lionize grit and perseverance, which, is also very important, but it can be taken too far for sure. Many times we would benefit from a little bit of perspective and just like a pause in how things are. I do think that that ended up working out because I loved biology as a degree, and it also enabled me to do a dual degree in undergrad. I expanded my minor to be a full major in East Asian studies with an emphasis on Japanese language, which was, something that I really enjoyed and loved. And so, it wasn't all bad, but I think my path would have been a lot different if I had just taken one semester even off to fully focus on myself and my recovery.
Wow. Does that help you then not stress out as much later? Because most things I would imagine, I hope, were less stressful or less testing than that.
I would like to say yes, but work in progress still. It's a good reminder. But yeah, I'm not the Zen master that I would like to be.
Of course. We're all works in progress, I suppose, right?
Yeah, definitely.
And then life's always dynamic. Once you figure everything out, it's going to present a new challenge that we didn't see before anyway.
And sometimes the context changes and lessons you learned previously are no longer applicable. So
makes sense. Do you have a set of people you seek guidance from or mentorship or suggestions from when you're making any major decisions or just in general?
Yeah, I mean, first and foremost, my wife is my guiding star, my cheerleader. I'm also part of a fellowship program called the Material Change Institute Fellowship. It was started by an incredible woman named Eve Blossom. She started this as sort of a way to get more venture capital and investment dollars being used for good in addition to profit, and also to just get more people interested in venture capital and knowing the different, and investment in general, knowing the different ways that you can get involved in the ecosystem, and you don't just have to be in VC. But through that fellowship program, my co-fellows it's just an incredible group of people. And in particular, I have a small peer group within that has been irreplaceable in the sort of journey that I've been on with standing up the fund and just running ideas past, and even helping with like deck design or review or practice pitching and that sort of thing. That's been a key tool for me in the past year.
Okay. And most of us, right, that have had good luck and some success have had a network or set of resources that have been very helpful, sometimes in a formalized or organized fashion. And sometimes they're just like 3 or 5 people you feel close to or you confide in, and then you reach out to them for different things. That's good to hear. Do you have any suggestions for people? Like, I think some of the audience members might be a little bit younger or still earlier in their careers, as far as, how to cultivate such a network, and also how to probably be a giver, right? Not just a recipient.
Yeah, I think that the biggest thing is being open to serendipity and to possibilities, trying not to be transactional and just, taking a meeting with anybody that wants to speak with you and sharing your story and listening to theirs. From a purely sort of productivity lens, I think it's still good to do that because you never know who may be a useful contact in 2 weeks, 3 weeks, 10 years, 15, what have you. And it always behooves you to sort of do that work up front. But just on a personal level too, I think that I learn the most from just talking to people and seeing what they're doing, the challenges they're facing, what they're building, and how they've overcome their challenges. That has been incredibly useful to me in building my own thesis. And like you said, it's a good way to be a net positive, to be a giver in your network and your community. The other thing is, I think you got to show up in places. You can't build community if you're not there with people. I'm a lifelong introvert that somehow happened into being in a extremely extroverted job, but you got to push yourself sometimes to go to that social event or function or lecture or, what have you. You'll probably end up meeting another introvert like yourself that's in the corner and have a great conversation. So you just got to do it.
Yeah, I think some of the points you're making resonate well with me. I'm classified, I think, as an introvert. We have one kid, a daughter, who also probably is an introvert. So we've had to practice, I guess, how to navigate life, where, especially in the American culture, I think where extroversion is probably expected or more rewarded sometimes, right? So, but yeah, I mean, I love that the phrase, you got to show up, right? Because almost everything else is a detail.
Yep. If you're not in the room, then
yeah, nothing's going to happen. I think those are great pointers or reminders for some of us that might have experienced or seen some of these things before. So I guess as a way to recharge, what do you do? Walks, workout?
I'm a big reader, love reading, have been working out a lot more lately. I love the outdoors. I love snowboarding here in Washington. I go, hunting or hiking and camping a couple times a year. So, love to get out in the outdoors. Sometimes all you can do is take a walk between your Zoom meetings, but if that's what you got to do, you got to do it.
Yeah, I think I'm an outdoors person, or at least I like outdoors, even if I don't get to experience them as much as I would like to or should.
It's never as much as you'd like to.
But Seattle is such a great place for that, right? Despite our rainy reputation, it's actually not so bad.
I love the rain here in Seattle. I live for the long dark during the winters. I had enough of sun and heat in Arizona and had 27 years of it. I'm good.
Yeah, it looks like we've covered a good portion of what I had in mind, but
I think on the sort of diagnostic side, I think those are only going to keep getting better. The challenge is going to be taking that data and making useful actions off of it or insights, because you can do a full body MRI and see you might have a fat deposit or something like that and can really freak people out. But I think tying what's really important from those diagnostics to the data and communicating that to people in the correct way is going to be very important. I think, AI could potentially help with that, with LLMs and being able to have a conversation with people that they might be unable or unwilling to have with their doctors. So that'll be very interesting. On the sort of political macro changes, I think, unfortunately, like what we're seeing is just an acceleration of trends that already existed. I think post-2020 with George Floyd, there was a big upswing in dollars and support to sort of more DEI-focused programs. But already before this November, those numbers were below where they had been in 2020 anyways. So I think that it's an area that you shouldn't count on the prevailing winds of sentiment. You should believe in your thesis. I believe that these founders and these companies are a better bet, and I'm going to put my money where my mouth is. And we'll see on the other end if historical data is any precedent, then I believe we'll come out the other side. But I think we need more people to draw a line in the sand and say this is the right way to invest, not just for moral reasons, but also for purely financial reasons as well. Because I think that's the only way that attitudes will end up changing on that front. I won't be able to keep writing checks if we're not making money. So
exactly.
that is definitely the priority one.
If you have anything for me, I'm happy to, reciprocate. Answer anything you might want to ask.
I would turn your last question on you. What are the sort of things that your trends you're keeping an eye on or looking out for in the coming months?
I think hopefully it's a very long, for every one of us, growth opportunity, right? It's a experience in elevating self-awareness, basically. That's, if I had to say, what is the one, if somebody says, what's the point of life? Then that's what it is. That would be my answer, right? And obviously, by definition, it can't be fun all the time. Otherwise, you're not going to be able to elevate your self-awareness. And so you go through periods of adversity, like the great one you described, you went through. And then you go through periods of fun or pleasurable experiences. I think the American system is extremely resilient, and I think that'll probably get tested, right, in the coming years. And it's already been tested recently, right? But nothing is a given anymore, right? And so for some of us, or those of us that have studied or have lived through history of the first half of 20th century, I think they will probably find themselves not surprised right now, as to what's happening, I guess, in America politically and probably popular culture-wise, etc. But I think in a way, this will be very painful for certain members of our society, but I think on the whole, it'll serve as a growth experience. So it's kind of like we made progress, then we feel like we might be regressing, but it's almost like the profitability and scalability we talked about.
Yeah.
Right. And sometimes the getting better is very painful and slow, but exactly. So that's kind of my faith in the future, right? Or that's how I keep faith in the future. And then I think technologically, it's all overlapping, right? Technology, politics, identity, geopolitics, and so on. Technologically, obviously, AI is huge. It's going to have huge effects, but it just so happened that I think probably ChatGPT popularized it in the front and center of the zeitgeist in the last 2-3 years. But it's a technology that's been in the making for decades, and it keeps getting better. But it's not just AI, right? It's technology in general, and then on multiple fronts, whether it's things like CRISPR, and I don't even know the names of things that are happening in the life sciences and biosciences that are advancing that domain very, very quickly. I look forward to a time when serendipity and kind of, unplanned learning and discovery and the joy of that and the growth through that will be, achieved again. So it's kind of like now with personalization and recommendation engines and everything, it's like, and then I don't know if you use Spotify and Apple and all this stuff, but it seems like the machines or whatever versions of machines we have right now, they're trying to box humans into a limited set of possibilities. But I think we're going to come out of the other end where that chance of discovery and serendipity, I think, is going to be back, because the machines are going to actually support that as opposed to fighting it. It feels like they're fighting it right now.
I firmly believe that chaos is an opportunity.
Of course.
And so opportunity for good and for bad, but now's the time that we need to be building, because that's the time where things have the greatest chance of, breaking through.
The yin and yang, good, bad, all those things, right, that have existed forever in humanity will continue to, right? And so as the technologies give us more power, so you're going to see wider swings, right? The bad actors will be able to do much bigger and higher scale damage, unfortunately, from time to time. But that means the good actors will have to continue to be that much more vigilant or that much more engaged and present, right? And show up, right? Yeah. So, well, that's wonderful. I appreciate your time.
Likewise. Thank you for having me.
You've given a lot of things for us to think about or to get inspired from. And I appreciate it. And I look forward to, learning how the fun goes.
To talk in a few months with good news.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Thank you, Jesse.
Take care, Haresh. Thanks.